What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so I've never done a video talking about this particular game from Larry Joe Bird, the player who I'm going to start saying is the greatest small forward of all time. I don't care how many points a certain player scores. I want to talk about a game that most of his fans love and see as his greatest performance, although Larry Bird himself does not think of that as his greatest performance. As a matter of fact, he doesn't really think too fondly of that game, surprisingly. And I'll talk about that later on. But it's Larry Bird's watershed moment. I think it happened March I'm going off memory here, man, so please forgive me if I'm wrong. I think it was March 12th, 1985. I know it was certainly in March. I think it was March 12th, 1985. And that was a game where Larry Bird scored 60 points on the road against the Atlanta Hawks. 60 points. Now, the incredible thing about this performance is that it came just 9 days after his teammate, Kevin McHale, scored what was then the Celtics team record of 56 points against the Detroit Pistons. And I think prior to that, I think Sam Jones had the record for most points in a regular season game. I'm a little bit fuzzy with that. I think it was Sam Jones that had a 51-point game. But if you include the postseason, John Havlicek had a 54-point game in the postseason back in 1973, I think it was. But anyway, Kevin McHale had just scored 56 points. And when Kevin McHale came out that game, Larry Bird told Kevin McHale, "You should have stayed in the game. You should have stayed in the game and went for 60." Because Larry Bird, ever the competitor, was going to try to break that record. And in just a little over a week, I should say, he did just that. Now, some people wonder, wait a minute, if this was a road game against the Hawks, why were they in New Orleans? Well, the reason why they were in New Orleans is because by the mid-1980s, in that season, and in the mid-1980s, the Atlanta Hawks were starting to struggle a little bit with their home attendance. They were starting to struggle, although they would definitely improve as they got deeper into the Dominique Wilkins era. So as a consequence, the Atlanta Hawks franchise had an arrangement with financier, some entrepreneur, who paid, I think, something like close to $2 million to have 12 of the Atlanta Hawks' 41 home teams played at New Orleans. I think he's the guy that owned that arena. Now, remember, at that time, New Orleans had not had any NBA basketball since around 1978 or 9, I think it was, when that team left New Orleans to go to Utah. So that was a boom. And that year, Atlanta went 6-6 on the road. 6-6 at home, excuse me. They went 6-6 at home. One of those losses was, of course, this particular game where Larry Bird went off. Now, what's so memorable about this performance? What's so memorable about this performance was the degree of difficulty of some of Larry Bird's shots. I remember him hitting one shot in the corner where he literally had, it was like a heave where he leaned into the defender and leaned and shot it and still switched it. And of course there was the shot that didn't count where he was falling backwards, shooting, landing into a trainer's lap, as the defender fouled him. and still made the shot, but the foul came before the shot, so they didn't count. And also, this game was memorable for a few Atlanta Hawks players high-fiving each other and, basically high-fiving each other and celebrating some of the shots that Larry Bird made. Now, you might wonder, that maybe that's partially why they were struggling with attendance, because if you got players, teammates on one team cheering the opposing player and his offensive exploit, there's something wrong with that. Dominique Wilkins and a couple other players, I think Tree Rollins was pissed off. Tree Rollins, I think, was, of all the players, the most pissed off at the teammates doing that. And apparently Tree Rollins and Dominique Wilkins demanded that the coach find those players. I can't remember their names now, but they demanded that the coach, who I believe was Mike Fratello at the time, find those players, which is what they did. Because look, I understand players can oftentimes forget about the competitive aspect of it and actually just look at the game and see what's going on. And I understand you can go, wow, hold my head and shake your hand. But yeah, to be that demonstrative about it, to be high-fiving each other and stomping your feet, that's unprofessional and almost damn near, what's the word I'm looking for? Insubordinate or mutinous. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't do that, man. You don't openly celebrate an opponent kicking your ass, But Larry Bird wound up with 60 points that game. Matter of fact, he had a stretch during the game where he scored 32 points in 14 minutes. And that's where he had those memorable moments. If I remember correctly, it was a pull-up jumper from maybe about 20 feet out, I think, which he made at the buzzer that gave him 60 points. I think the final score might have been something around like 126, something around 126, 115. I'm going by memory here. Okay, I might be a little off with some of my numbers. But something around that range. Larry Bird, I believe, was 22 of 36 from the floor, 1 of 4 from downtown. So he didn't have a superbly efficient three-point shot that night, but he was 15 of 16 from the line, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. Now, surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, Larry Bird was not that impressed with his performance. Matter of fact, he didn't really like that particular game. And it goes to show you how Larry Bird would loathe how the NBA is played today. And it kind of gives you an idea about how his true feelings about the game today. This is what he had to say. See if I can find it. He said, quote, back in the 2015 interview to Mike Mazzio, quote, "It wasn't that good of a game. I like the hard-fought, scrappy games, pounded inside. It was just a loosey-goosey game, i.e., not really great defense being played, jumpers, back and forth, whoever scored the most points wins type game. It was just a loosey-goosey game. It was a pretty close game, as I remember. We weren't up 20-25, but we were up 10 the whole way, and it just wasn't a good game. I ran a 5-mile race 2 days before that, and actually I was very sore. My legs were really sore. I wasn't tired or anything, but I was really sore. He said, I knew I was going to play that night. I just didn't know how effective I was going to be, but once I started going, I was making shots. But it just wasn't a fun game to play in. It wasn't my type of game. It's interesting that he says he likes those hard-fought, pounded inside games, which is anathema to how they play the game today. So when Bird talks about how the game is in a great place, today and all of that. I think that's Larry Bird being a great ambassador and trying to sell the game today. But in reality, I just, knowing Larry Bird and how he played, there's no way in hell he could enjoy how the game is played today. There's no way in hell. So, Larry Bird, of course, was in the midst of the best run of his career at that particular time. He had already won the MVP award the year before. And that year he won his second MVP. And that year he would win his second MVP, as I said before. And he averaged over 28 points per game, over 10 rebounds, and over 6 assists, winning his second of 3 consecutive MVPs. So that's the story of Larry Bird's 60-point performance. And will it ever be broken? I could see it being broken. I could definitely see it. The guy that I see that could break it is probably Jason Tatum. But I could definitely see, in the right circumstances, I could also see a guy like Jaylen Brown breaking it. Just because of how often they shoot the three-point shot and how much easier it is to score in today's NBA compared to that era. But anyway, that's just my take on it. Tell me what you guys think.